Good morning, my friends. Welcome, welcome, welcome. April with Medwell Health and Wellness. We are so happy that you are here, and surprise, it's Tuesday. I know our typical Medwell Unscripted is on Thursdays, but we couldn't help but have a special day for our friend Nikki Lawley, who is going to be an awesome chat today with us. So we'll get more into that in a second. Just some housekeeping, friends. We are streaming to Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. I can see all of your comments and questions. Please feel free to drop a question, say hello. And if you are catching the replay, we will absolutely get back to you after our session here. So don't worry, don't fret. Your questions all will be answered. All right. So today, like I said, a very special day. Today, we're going to be talking about advocating for the power of medical cannabis in your wellness. And I'm going to read you, I don't have it memorized, so I am reading, so in all transparency here. But Nikki Lawley she is a traumatic brain injury survivor, LPN, and brand ambassador. She's going to share about her journey through using cannabis as part of her wellness journey, her amazing advocacy work, and what you should know about the power of the plant. You know what, friends? Emily, we've been doing Medwell Scripted. Gosh, I think we're working on in the new year. It'll be 3 years, Emily, right? Yeah. So we have, this segment. I mean, I love all our segments, right? But this segment, we've had some unbelievably amazing people in the cannabis world. So Emily and I hope that you're enjoying this as much as we are. So first, I want to start with introducing Emily Waxman, who is our director of community outreach. I'm sorry, friends. I'm really stumbling. The power of live. Emily is my partner here on Medwell Unscripted. She is the awesome gal behind the scenes who gets all of these amazing guests. So I'm going to have Emily tell you what she's up to. She has been busy, like she's been out there in the community. Emily, tell us what's up.
Oh, sure, April. So yes, I've been a very busy bee these days. You'll certainly find me out and about in the community, at your local dispensary, just being able to talk to anyone and everyone who is interested in hearing about how to obtain a medical card. Maybe you have your medical card and you have questions. You're not sure what to do when the renewal's coming up, or lots of adult use folks asking me why they would even want to get a medical card to begin with, because we do have legal cannabis here in the beautiful state of Massachusetts. So, lots of education. That is the goal here at Medwell. And that is what prompted us to start Unscripted to begin with, April, right? When COVID came upon us, we said we are not going to stop our education efforts. We're going to make sure we continue. And this is why we have these wonderful, amazing human beings coming on Unscripted. And so, so it's all about education. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it back to you, April, so we can get going. I am so thrilled to have this amazing guest here today. I feel like we should have an official drum roll.
I know. So we have a celebrity among us. She is a social media influencer. She's a brand ambassador. Without further ado, Nikki Lawley. She's going to tell us a little bit more about herself, as she only can do. Take it away, Nikki.
Hello, April and Emily. Thanks so much for having me on Medwell Unscripted. I, too, am a passionate cannabis advocate, not by choice necessarily, but by necessity. About 6 years ago, I was working as a pediatric nurse, and a child decided they didn't want a vaccine. When we work in pediatrics, this is not something new, my friends. Children don't like to get shots. And this is not my first rodeo, but this sure did change my life in a second. A child didn't want the vaccine. He hit me in the forehead. I bounced off a plaster wall and back into his head.
Oh my gosh.
That was 10, 11, 16, and that's the last day I was able to work. I became plagued with what's known as the invisible disability, a traumatic brain injury you can't see on the outside. I don't walk with a cane, or I don't have a cast on my head or on my leg, or something that you can see. Oh, Houston, there's a little bit of a problem. It's truly invisible. And until you've experienced a TBI, I surely didn't know what one was. I definitely didn't know how to deal with it. As a nurse, I literally relied on doctors all my life. They were my bosses, they were my colleagues, they were the people you listen to. And I became a victim of the New York State workers' compensation system because I was injured at work. I went from being a respected colleague to a 44-year-old woman, sorry, 46-year-old woman who was literally crazy. I was told there's nothing wrong with me. My scans are normal. I'm like, but my brain isn't working normal. I can't do basic math. I can't count change. I don't recognize a quarter, a dime, and a nickel. And then to add that up, I'm lost. These were not normal anxiety and depression manifestations. And that's what they continued to try and tell me was the problem. And nothing was further from the truth. I began to totally lose who I was. I really began to feel crazy. Going to over 68 doctors in an 18-month period, being on 63 different pharmaceuticals in that 18 months, having zero hope. My journey was kind of strange. I had used cannabis before recreationally, but not ever considered it medicine. If you would have told me your child was taking cannabis for seizures, I would have said, yeah, we're calling CPS on that. We are not cool with that. And I now have 180 degrees, changed my opinion on all that. But we don't know what we don't know. And I guess, Emily and April, one of the things that I try and teach people is you know your body better than that doctor who spends 7 minutes with you. You know your symptoms way better than anyone else, and no one can tell you how you're feeling. I had to learn to be a voice and be a voice that necessarily didn't agree with my training, one that questioned the doctor and said, but yeah, I don't think that's what's going on here. And I found cannabis because 4 months after my injury, my husband thought it would be a great idea to take me to Las Vegas for a vacation, a reset for Christmas kind of thing. And that was only 4 months after I was hurt. And if you knew the symptoms that I was suffering from, you immediately would have been like, why in the world would you take her to Las Vegas? That's exactly how I felt. Why are we going to Vegas? I can't get out of the bed. I can't even think of my most basic things. The last thing I want to do is sit in front of flashy slot machines all day. But again, he's like, well, I got to try and make you happy. You're just so miserable. That particular trip in January of 2017, like I said, 4 months after my injury, the end of January, I was ready to take my life. I was on the balcony of the Cosmopolitan Hotel, and I was only 7 stories up. There's a whole backstory behind that, but we don't have time to get into that. But I was desperate. I was like done. I felt like such a burden to my family, to everyone around me. If I couldn't work, what good was I? At 46, you're like acting like a damn invalid. And how in the hell are you going to get past this? And so at the end of the day, I was standing on the balcony and I'm looking down and there's the pool area below me. So all that is, umbrella things, the tops of umbrellas. And I'm like, well, this is going to be perfect. I'm going to jump and I'm going to be cushioned by an umbrella and I'm not going to screw it up. I'm going to be just more screwed up. And the thought of being more screwed up than I already was like, oh, hell no. So at that same time, I'm looking over the balcony, a billboard came by saying, get your medical marijuana card in Nevada today. I laughed like hysterically at that. I just found that rather amusing. Great idea, Nikki. Fry your brain on drugs. Smart. I'm from the Nancy Reagan era,
right. The stigma.
And we grew up with that image. And I told my husband about it. And he's like, well, let's go. You've smoked pot before. That's made you laugh. Let's do anything. So long story short, I went to my first dispensary. I got my medical card. It was the super easy process, but what was crazy is I had no idea what I was doing. Walking into my first dispensary, a bad example, but kind of an appropriate example. If you've ever walked into an adult toy store, You have no idea what to touch, what's safe, what to look at, because it's so scary. It's all overwhelming. It's things you've never ever seen. And oh my God, if somebody sees me in this section, that means I'm like super crazy and super weird. But at the end of the day, that's how I felt walking into a cannabis dispensary. I was just so overwhelmed with, what do I touch? What do I look at? And that poor bud tender that day, he had a 46-year-old woman just bawling and, in so much pain. Anyway, long story short, we loaded up the whole cart of a bunch of different things. And I go back to the hotel. I ate probably 7 different whole packs of medicinal gummies, having no idea what the effect was.
Oh, no.
But it's okay. I lack the cytochrome gene that doesn't metabolize THC edibles. So I had no idea what I was doing, but in my case, it really was okay. So I ate all these gummies and I did fall asleep. I will say I slept for probably 12 hours uninterrupted, which was more sleep than I had gotten in 4 months. And then the next day, I just felt hungover. My husband's like, why don't you smoke that joint the kids told you to use? And I'm like, smoking right now just sounds like it's just going to hurt my head. Well, ladies, I smoked that joint and I got out of the room for the first time in 4 days. I left the hotel room willingly, voluntarily, and went and had breakfast. If you knew the place I was in prior to that level and then to where I got, I mean, that plant saved my life that day. I came home to New York saying, yo, doc, look what I figured out. This weed stuff works. Cannabis was not on our approved list of conditions for chronic pain. So I then was right back in the same crappy position I was when I went to Vegas. So I became despondent, went to all these doctors. That was the whole cycle of all these different physicians and drugs and things like that. Then I accidentally became a cannabis medical refugee in Canada. I had friends who read one of my posts that said, we've got pot here. Why don't you come over here? And I live in Buffalo, New York. So living in Buffalo, I'm 15 minutes from the Canadian border. So the whole country had legalized cannabis by this point, but I had friends who had medical cards. And so I began to learn the power of the plant. I began to learn how to use it and why. Like, I mean, one strain would make me feel like totally paralyzed and in the couch. And then the next one, I felt like I was playing Scrabble. The next one, my husband called, I'll never forget, probably 6 months into the journey of my Canadian medical refugee status. And he literally said, what's wrong with you? When he answered the phone. And I'm like, what do you mean, what's wrong with me? And he said, you sound normal. Like, you sound really normal. I am playing Scrabble and doing some basic math. Like, maybe it's this pot. And there began my quest for understanding why works and for what and why. And I began to journal the experience in an app that was in Canada that was available to me. And so that's kind of the overstep of where I started and how I kind of got to where I am today.
Awesome.
Amazing story, Nikki. I mean, really incredible when you think of where you were at that point in Vegas and to where you are today is just, I mean, I just applaud you for, it kind of goes back to the saying, where there's a will, there's a way. And thank goodness you found a way.
Tragedy and a triumph is what I try and say, Emily.
For sure. Yeah, for sure.
I never would have found that plant if I wasn't in that dire situation. Mm-hmm. I would have never found the plant if I had not given up all hope on medical interventions, if you will. And cannabis didn't cure me. Let me be crystal clear about that. Right. Cannabis just helps mitigate my symptoms. It helps my symptoms be manageable. The things I still suffer from are cognitive function, anxiety, depression, and chronic pain of my head and neck. So finding strains that address those 3 symptoms is what my quest is. And that's how the whole journaling of the experience began. And I use an app called Strain Print that in Canada had all the back end certificates of analysis of it. And when you understand the chemical constituents of the plant means so much more than just the name Blue Dream. Okay.
Well, I'm sorry. What is it called again? I just want to look it up. I actually haven't.
Strain print, like strain the name, and print, like printing a document. And strain print, they've actually white labeled the app for me. I'm trying to get more US states in their database so that they can have more users participating. They have over 2 million data points in Canada for their patients. They are in Florida pretty heavily, but that's really the only state they've really concentrated on because they're really almost a research, real world evidence data system. And so one of the cool things about them is they can create a recipe like nobody else can. How? Because they're not using things in a test tube or on a rat. They're actually hearing from the 40-something-year-old woman with chronic pain, with anxiety, depression, and with cognitive fog issues. So they know what chemical constituents and what terpenes potentially work to help with that. But I didn't understand any of this when I started this journey. So, I mean, to have learned all that and to be able to speak on it educatedly and break things down so people can understand it is really where I see myself being a dynamic individual in this industry, because I try and really dumb it down because I had to have it really dumbed down for me.
And I think that's super important, especially because of the aging community, and really, I think the benefits to seniors, right? Like there's so many benefits, and I think earlier you touched on kind of the Reagan era, the Nancy Reagan era. There is still that stigma around. I brought it up on the show before. My father, him coming to terms with us working even in this industry was like, what do you mean? What do you mean? Like, oh, somebody gave me brownies long time. Like he still has that stigma. It's better now, but yeah, it's crazy.
It's a real thing. And people don't know what they don't know. And I can't say that loud enough. People judge what they don't understand. And I'm guilty of it. I mean, if you would have, seen me smoking a joint coming online, immediately that's going to change your perception of me, unless you see me looking like this and maybe not smoking. Like you think I'm more credible right now than I would be if I'm smoking a joint. Why? Because in our mind, that's what we were trained to think. That whole cycle and that stigma surrounds us all. And yes, we are on social media, so naturally smoking a joint is not wise on live. But at the end of the day, I was just recently at MJ BizCon, and I couldn't even make it in the show inside because it was so overwhelming. And I literally was in there 5 minutes, and I had so many people swarm me that I was blocking traffic. So I'm like, this is not going to work for me. So I ended up going out on the smoking patio. And what's funny is the judgment of people that are even in this industry of meeting me on the smoking patio was so huge. And I'm like, I'm out there because it's way less overwhelming, and anyone who uses the plant is most likely going to surface out there at some point. So anyone I really want to talk to is probably going to come out there. And it worked beautifully for me. But it was so funny because I had someone who I really respect who said, I don't believe in cannabis. And I said, why the hell are you here? I can't believe you're out here. What's that guy going to do for you? He's not going to make you any money. I'm like, I'm not doing this for money. I'm doing this to help people. I'm giving back something that is my life. I mean, what price do you put on a life? That billboard saved my life, my friends. It saved my life. So how do you put a price tag on that? And at the end of the day, the more people I help is what I'm trying to do. Do I need to survive? Do I need to eat and, exist? 100%. But my focus is not money.
Yeah. So I guess I want to, do you mind just quickly kind of going over that Canadian piece too? Because I think Like are you still in Buffalo, New York? You're still, yeah. Okay. So kind of what's the difference that you're finding between Canada and here?
Well, what's super cool is you're in Massachusetts. So if I had a perfect world and comparing Massachusetts, New York, and Canada, it's a perfect alignment because each of these three are pretty much like their own little country.
Yeah.
Canada is so different because they're so transparent. They've seen the benefit of the plant for years and years and years. And it was only medical until October 17th of 2018. So up until it was only in the medical era, there was research going on. There was like a patient had to get a medical card and be supervised by a clinic, a clinic that would guide them and teach them what licensed producers to go through. They call them in Canada licensed producers. In New York State, we call them registered organizations for our medical program. In Massachusetts, I believe you call them growers and processors or cultivators. So understanding the nuances between these different medical and the words we use are really important, because when I say an LP, you're like, what the hell's an LP? But I just know because of being in Canada. But the biggest difference I see in being a federally regulated country is you have consistent products across the entire country. Okay. So if you're in Ontario or you're in New Brunswick, you can actually get the same product from Greybeard or from Aurora Cannabis or from Tilray. And they have different brands, yes, but all those brands are available from point A of the country to the ultimate western part of the country.
Yeah.
So Massachusetts is more like, yes, it's statewide, but only certain products are available in certain areas of your state.
Correct.
So like when I'm in Boston, what I have available to me compared to what I have available in Hopkinton is totally different. Like different brands, different staff, different dispensary names.
Right.
New York, we have medical dispensaries, but we only have 10 registered organizations for our entire state.
Wow.
Guys, we have 23 million people in my state. Okay.
Right.
So to have 10 big guys controlling the entire market right now, we're legal now, but there's nowhere for adults to go purchase cannabis legally unless they get a medical card.
I'm in Connecticut. It's the same way. We actually have less than 10 here.
It's really messed up. It's really messed up. And so federal legalization, is it a perfect thing? No. But having consistent, reliable products from a medical perspective is what I care about. I don't get high, I get medicated. I don't focus on THC percentage. I focus on the terpenes and the minor cannabinoids in the plant, because I've learned through trial and error. And when I go to a different state, which really is a different country in America, the labels are so different. Like if you go to Nevada, they have probably one of the best labeling systems on the planet, because they put the top 3 minor cannabinoids. They put the top percentages of terpenes and the percents. That right there puts them in a whole different class than Canada, than Boston, than Massachusetts, than New York. As a medical patient, our certificates of analysis are proprietary. So I can't even go into the dispensary without going through a whole hullabaloo of, well, what's this and what's that? And give us the lot number. And it's like this big secret sauce you got to go through. They use the documentation from Leafly and Weed Maps for what their strains are. I mean, you guys, what's on Leafly is not what's in your jar. But people don't understand that. And Canada is so cool because, I mean, I've got to tell you, I do a lot of R&D, if you will, because I'm always trying to find the best strain for my symptoms. And so I tend to buy an exorbitant amount of products, but I actually have a storage unit in Ontario that I cross the border. I take my 15 minutes, my little butt over to Canada. I go to my storage unit. I then take my storage products. I have like 2 pounds of weed in Canada. And I take that and I go to my friend's house, and then I unpack and I roll and I sample and I document it all in this strain print app so that I can learn what works and why. If I'm having anxiety right now and it's at a level of 6 or 7, what does this strain do for it? Does it take it to a 2 or does it take it to a 9?
Yeah.
And understanding what you're treating is such a big part of the journey, because you can't just say you have a TBI, because what I suffer from my traumatic brain injury versus what Kyle Turley suffers from with his TBI or a different football player, it's going to be different. And so what bothers you the most is probably the biggest advice I would have to someone coming in as a new patient or a new canna consumer. Figure out what bothers you the most. Is it that hip pain? Is it that, brain fog because you're going through menopause? Is it that, anxiety just going out to the store? Then begin your journey. And it's more about the terpenes than the THC. I know we talk about that, but people don't hear that. And when you go to a bud tender who's like, oh, this is 26% THC, man. Grandma doesn't want 26% THC. She's not going to do a dab. A lot of people too, like all the different names of concentrates that kind of gone to like butter, BUDDER, or batter, or sugar. And I had a patient that I heard of that literally went into a dispensary and bought sugar thinking it was sugar to put in her coffee. And so she spent $90 on a gram of sugar that was not that, right? And people are too scared to ask, they're like, I'm talking about, the adult toy store is a little scary and a little weird to talk about, but it's a real thing because people don't know what they don't know. And so instead of, asking the girl behind the counter, hey, is this okay? She doesn't want to talk about it. And so she just buys it and puts it in a bag and runs out to her car. Well, they do the same thing in the dispensary. And, again, I'm not like the frequenter of adult toy stores, but I use that because it's almost such a shocking example. Like people are like, what? But at some point in your youth, in your younger years, we've all been to one. So why keep keeping it in the closet? You know what I'm saying? Like, let's just be real. Let's be transparent and let's talk about things that people can relate to. And my filterless self since my brain injury, I think is what has gotten me the most followers. And do I say some off color stuff? 100%. But sometimes that shit's really funny. So
that it is. The other thing too is that, especially since COVID, like being able to use these platforms, it humanizes who you are. People connect with who they connect with, right? So that's right. Where you were talking about your followers, but you're just being honest and you're just being, there's no pretense, which I love that. So,
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, that's such sound advice, Nikki, because, we certainly, we see our patients, we talked with them. We have amazing physicians and nurse practitioners here who certainly will give as much advice as they can, or that they're regulated to say. There's only so much you can really, say to patients without, kind of putting yourself in a not great spot. So, they give them the best advice, but then, we here in Mass, then once they leave our office or their telehealth appointment, then their, next stop is the dispensary where there's, now we live in this world with 9 million things on the menu. So, if you're a new user like yourself, when you first started, what do you choose? What do I want to focus on? What is the best product here for me? So that's just such amazing advice that you're giving to our audience here, because, it's a very overwhelming step to have to kind of go into that place for the first time and where do I begin? So I love that how you explained it.
And I think that education, somebody's got to pay for it, and nobody wants to pay for it. Like the licensed producers don't want to pay for it. The consumer sure as hell doesn't want to pay for it, but yet that's the piece that's missing. What I'm finding, instead of it being doctors teaching patients, it's patients teaching doctors.
Yes.
We're in a whole different realm of healthcare, if you will. And
Absolutely.
being your own advocate is so critical. But the nurse practitioners, the doctors, the physicians, they don't know if you don't share the feedback. And if you went against their recommendation, and let's say you did get a high THC product, but it really helped you sleep that night, you don't want to tell them because he didn't recommend that.
Right.
But it's a catch-22. Transparency is what is going to advance us. Transparency is what is going to move this industry forward. But education is critical.
Absolutely.
Logging and documenting the experience. I don't remember how green crack made me feel versus how orangutan titties made me feel. You know what I mean? Like legit, the name's got to change, guys. Okay.
Right.
I don't want to go to my neighbor down the street and say, "Hey, sis, go get yourself some orangutan titties. It really worked for my cognitive function. How do you think it worked for you?" It's just, it's
Agreed.
I mean,
Actually, here in Connecticut, they don't have names at all on our list.
I don't know that that's the right way either.
I completely agree.
New Hampshire's the same. Like they just give you a profile, which I love. I love the profile, but I kind of know cheese strains usually work for me.
You're absolutely right. And it's one of those things where you can't, you take this and you try to Google, like just to like learn a little bit more about it. And I think the one thing that they're trying to do, and just kind of, whether right or wrong, they're using their pharmacists. They want you to consult with them. They want to so there's good and bad behind it, right? Like we're in a very impatient society. I want to know what this is now, but at the same time, they want to educate you. So there is some validity to that as well.
I mean, we have pharmacists in New York, and we have good pharmacists and we have bad pharmacists. So we have those that actually understand cannabis and those who are just doing a job.
Right.
And if you don't understand the plant, I just don't understand how you can do that job. Yeah. Meaning, I'm not saying you have to be a consumer, but I'm saying you have to understand how it interacts with people in a different way.
Yeah.
And so I love the fact that we have that opportunity of educating with pharmacists. And I'm terrified for New York State that we're going to lose our pharmacists, because there are patients that need to know drug-to-drug interactions. There are patients that, you're a bud tender, you see grandma come in, grandma's got glaucoma. Well, you're going to recommend probably CBD for grandma because CBD is what grandmas usually go for. That's going to increase her interocular pressure. And that's the worst thing you could have possibly ever recommended to her. But they don't know that, right? And so I think it's really risky to not have some educated medical professional on staff. Does it have to be a pharmacist? Does it have to be a nurse? No, someone that knows the body, though, and that understands the plant and drug-to-drug interactions.
Yeah, totally.
So what kind of tips? So kind of what kind of tips would you give somebody, whether they have a TBI or just a medical condition, as advocating for their own wellness? So if I'm walking into a dispensary, we just had conversation. I mean, obviously every state is different. Like what are some top 3 questions that you would have them encourage them to ask in advocating for themselves?
I first would ask them to understand what conditions they were treating. Meaning the first thing they need to do is a self-assessment. The patient needs to know what they're treating. And again, don't just say I have Parkinson's walking into the dispensary. Say I have tremors, I have brain fog, I have this, that, and the other thing. I welcome patients especially to learn about terpenes. What I've created is this great little guide. I personally didn't create it, but I've white labeled it. But it's a guide about all the minor cannabinoids and terpenes that will tell you the boiling points and what works health-wise and For what reason? This is the cannabis bioavailability. And so it talks about if you want to smoke it, the onset of it versus eating it. And then there's the whole family tree of cannabis on the back. So one of the things I'm trying to do is actually launch my own product. And this will be in every single product that I launch.
Amazing.
Why? Because education is so much more important than selling the product. And so I invite the consumers to understand what terpenes are. The simplest way of explaining terpenes, they're essential oils, my friends. Essential oils, whether it's oranges, lemons, whatever, if when you squirt a lemon in someone's face, that's immediately uplifting. That's immediately like, well, think of limonene as lemon juice. So one thing that's going to be more uplifting for most people, but it also can be anxiety producing. So understanding that while there may be a benefit, there may be a disadvantage too. So my first step is identify what you're treating. My second step is learn what terpenes are before you even hit that dispensary. Learn what essential oils could potentially benefit you based on reading it, Googling it, getting one of my guides, whatever that might be. And then the third thing I would do is look at those menus online, which are absolutely hell to navigate. 100% hell. And for someone who's 65, they're not going to want to look at that because it's overwhelming. It's like, I don't even know what I'm looking for. But for the person that's maybe in their 30s, that's a little more online savvy, after they've kind of homed in on what essential oils might work for them, then they can kind of get a feel. When you eat it, it takes a lot longer to metabolize through your system, and it actually changes chemical composition. So if you eat a fatty meal with THC and CBD, you're going to have a much more intense effect than if you're on an empty stomach. The bud tenders don't always share this information with you. And this is one thing I always recommend new users do is they actually have a bottle of either CBD tincture, a CBD vape, a CBD something, because CBD is an antagonist to THC. So if you ever start to feel a little too high or too medicated or a little wobbly, CBD on a rapid onset can actually counteract those effects immediately.
Yeah.
So I always recommend new users have either a vape or a tincture on hand, because then they can actually have something. I mean, peppercorns work, high sugar works, a hot shower, but if you're experiencing it for the first time, do you really want to start chewing on peppercorns?
Probably not.
Terpenes that actually work against each other. So it's the whole picture of the plant. Anything that's greater than 0.5%, that terpene will have an effect on the flower of how you smoke it, but the temperature has an effect on how you consume it as well. So certain boiling points make that terpene literally vaporize. It doesn't, you won't get that benefit of limonene if you're smoking a joint, but you will get the benefit of beta-carotene if you're smoking a joint because of the combustion temperature versus a vaporizing temperature. And this is all stuff that I've learned. Like, I am no brain surgeon on cannabis. Let me be crystal clear. I'm a patient that has taken her own health in her hands and tried to understand this plant and help as many people as I can. So what I share with you here is not medical advice. It's just my personal experience.
Which I think is awesome, because, so many people, obviously you do need to heed medical advice, but I think it's always great to have real world experience sharing their stories, because I think one of the biggest things, every story is different, but if you take a little piece of this and a little piece of that, it makes you a better educated consumer in finding what's right and an advocate for yourself. So
absolutely.
Nikki, as we're kind of getting ready to wrap up here, tell us a little bit about Element Apothic. So I've dropped your website. So tell us a little bit. We have Nikki in the plant. Her website is up here. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
So Element Apothic is a CBD brand that I believe in from a standpoint of their clean ingredients. She goes out of her way to do science-based formulas. They have a pharmacist on staff that's helping formulate the products. They have an amazing advisory board. Element Apothic just is really clean wellness. They actually are launching their products in Thailand. They'll be the first products in Thailand for a spa that's happening over there. And she's really like my business advisor. We've looked at creating THC products within her formulations, and she's looking at doing that. For me personally, CBD by itself, I need some THC. So CBD by itself is not effective for me the way it is for other people. But I love her lotions. I love her. All of her products are just phenomenal. The packaging is sustainable. Like she has a great tincture. She uses all broad spectrum. Her labeling is very clean and very clear. You can actually read the ingredients. That's a big thing. And so she's the only CBD brand on my website because she's really the only brand I know enough about that I feel comfortable recommending to others. So Element Apothic, they're really, really clean, good products. But
Awesome.
CBD.
Yeah, I love that you can easily read that because, we certainly there's millions of products out there and millions of packaging. And, we certainly have some of those products that are meant for our adult use friends, for sure. They might not need to see the label quite as much, but for our medical friends that, are really relying on this very heavily, we certainly want to be able to, certainly cleanly be able to read what is happening in this product, so that's really phenomenal.
Right. So anybody that's on my website, I believe in, I
Yeah.
guess is the best thing, and
Yeah,
Nikki's
that's
seal of
great.
approval is a pretty big deal because I'm really sort of, I guess the word is snobbish with what I put out in the product, meaning it's got to meet certain criteria. And if I endorse something, that means something. I don't get paid. I mean, technically I get an affiliate commission, but I don't even care about the affiliate commission. I'm just recommending this product, and whether you go through the link on the site
because it works.
Yeah. If you go to Element Apothic direct, I'm not going to get salty because I really don't care about your $3.50 that I might yield in commission. Do you know what I mean? Like, to me, it's about educating the right way and supporting those who support me, and I can feel good about supporting them back.
Absolutely. It's great.
Awesome. Well, and just to kind of go back to that, I don't think that it's snobbish. I think you're educated. You've done the due diligence. You have the experience, which I think speaks volumes in building that know, like, and trust factor, right? Like just by speaking to you, I know that you're a nurse by background, but you also have this experience, which is relatable to a lot of people. And, I think it's one of those things where I personally would rather learn from somebody who has that experience, and have a trust factor to that. So thank you very much for sharing that. And I definitely don't think it's snobbish. And I'm so grateful for your time today. Emily and I are,
Nikki.
Yeah, it's been great.
Know. You're just amazing, Nikki. Thank you so much. I mean, what an episode. It was just filled with so much amazing information for our audience. So I'm sure everyone out there that's watching this is enjoying it equally as much as I know April and I did today, for sure.
Absolutely. And as you develop your products, definitely keep us in the know. We'd love to have you back and share that with our audience. And I love that little card there. I think that would be so helpful to so many.
That is on my website, you guys. You can download
it. Okay, perfect.
And I also can customize it. So if Medwell wanted their name here, I can do that instead of Nikki in the plant.
Great idea.
It's an educated piece, and you can order it right on my website under the resources tab.
Awesome.
But just so you guys know, everyone wonders why I wear polka dots all the time and red. It's because cannabis connects my dots. So my product line is actually going to be called Dots, and it's going to be based on real world evidence, this data from strain print. It's going to be based on the experience and how products and the dominant terpenes make you feel. It's going to be very terpene focused and or essential oil focused. I try and use both terms so people don't feel it's so scary. But thank you both for your time today. And I love that you focus on medical patients and, you're helping with medical cards, and, it's a great support system. And I really appreciate being here as one of your guests. So
Thank you so much, Nikki.
I think you Buffalo people you have these huge passionate hearts. So last year we were at actually Emily, we were down there. We were at a Bucks Buffalo game, and we stayed in the hotel where all the Buffalo fans were. And Matt, wow, we're New England fans. And we're obviously very passionate, but my husband and I were sitting there and we were loving all the passion. So. I think it's in the water up there.
Yeah, you have people semi-naked at football games.
Those are stories that I keep. That's kind of like what goes on in Vegas stays in Vegas. I can't divulge what happened in the hotel that night, but
Yeah, facts. I love my Buffalo fans, and I mean, we are, the Bucks now, the Brady's over there, so now I can kind of like New England again. But I mean, I'm a diehard football fan, even though I've got a TBI, and I know all these football players are really suffering, but I can relate to the football players better than I can a lot of other people. Sure. So I'm super empathetic to them and trying to help the NFL normalize the conversation around cannabis as well.
It's wonderful. Absolutely. Wonderful. Definitely a community that could certainly use some education about it for sure.
Thanks again, you guys.
Thank you. Thank you, my friends, for watching. If you're catching the replay, feel free to drop us a comment or a question. We'll be absolutely happy to get back to you. And we will look forward to seeing you regular time, same place, next Thursday. And I can't even believe it, Emily. It's like the last one of our
I know. I can't believe it.
Yeah. So we'll... of course, we'll be back in the new year with something just as awesome. But thank you again, friends, and we will look forward to seeing you next week. Thanks, Emily. Thanks, Nikki.
Thank you.
Thanks.